Hello and welcome to this impressions video about the newest installment in the Overcooked series with Overcooked All You Can Eat, which was released recently on PS5 and Xbox Series X. Before we get into what I think about it and how it compares to the original two Overcooked games, I want to say a massive thank you to Team 17 for sending me a PS5 review copy. This is actually the very first review copy of a game that I've ever received, and that's just awesome considering how big of a fan I am of both Overcooked and Team 17 in general. With that out of the way, let's dive into what I think about it. Rather than Overcooked All You Can Eat being a brand new entry in the series, it's more so just an expanded port of both Overcooked 1 and 2 for next-gen systems. The main differences between this new version and the original versions is that with All You Can Eat, you get in every level from the two base games, and all of the DLC content in one easy-to-navigate package. You're also getting the standard next-gen upgrades like fancy lighting effects, 60 frames per second gameplay, 4K resolution, and something that's particularly noticeable with the Overcooked 1 content is that the graphics have received a pretty significant upgrade, which makes the game a lot more pleasant to look at and makes content from both games look completely consistent. Maybe you're watching this video though and you're unaware of what Overcooked actually is. Somehow I doubt that's the case, but to go over it quickly, Overcooked is a game with a focus on co-op multiplayer where you and up to 3 partners have to efficiently run a kitchen, prepping, cooking and sending out a variety of orders as quickly as possible. Obviously this isn't as straightforward as it sounds though, because the kitchens you're working in will be laid out in wacky ways and sometimes even feature obstacles and dynamic elements which can cause absolute chaos. The level design here is astonishingly good, and teamwork, as well as some intense multitasking, is always absolutely essential if you want to earn the highest star ratings. Speaking of which, the original Overcooked 2 introduced a new Game Plus mode where you had to go for a 4th star rating, which was by far the most difficult task to accomplish in the entire game, and I'm happy to see that this 4th star is now a part of the Overcooked 1 experience in All You Can Eat. A really annoying thing they brought over from Overcooked 2 though is the fact that if you get the 4th star score requirement before actually unlocking the new Game Plus mode, you aren't automatically rewarded with the 4th star, so you effectively need to do every level again even if you've already perfected some of them. Still, leaving that aside, one of the biggest selling points of All You Can Eat is that they've basically brought Overcooked 1 up to the same level of quality as Overcooked 2. And as a result, some of those levels from the first game are now among my favourites. I was a little bit disappointed by the fact that you can't throw food in the Overcooked 1 levels, but that is understandable considering that those levels weren't designed with that ability in mind because that was introduced in Overcooked 2. Another pretty big upgrade with this version is that it now takes advantage of the PS5 and Series X's SSD, which makes loading times almost instantaneous. While this is obviously a massive pro for the new version of the game, I noticed it actually causes some minor graphical issues, almost like it loads too fast for the game, which is odd considering this version is exclusive to next-gen systems. When a level loads, you see a split-second flicker of a loading screen before the level actually appears, and it just looks a little bit clumsy. This loading screen could have been straight up removed from the game entirely to avoid this flickering effect, and the game would feel a lot better for it. Another little niggly visual detail I noticed was how whenever there's a dialogue box, the text will scroll, and upon going to the next line, the box will flash black for a split second. And it would look so much better if the box just stayed there and didn't flash. These are obviously such insignificant problems to the game as a whole, but if these small things were smoothed over, it would dramatically improve the production value. It's just extra jarring when small things like this happen when the rest of the game is so well produced. Going back to the positives now though, I actually found that the controls in All You Can Eat felt a lot more responsive than the original versions. However, this might be because I played the original Overcooked 1 and 2 on the Switch and used the Joy-Cons, which are notorious for sometimes dropping inputs. So it could be that the controls are identical if you're going from the PS4 version to the PS5 version for all I know. But for me personally, going from the Switch to the PS5, this was a huge positive, and you can no longer blame your controller for any errors. And don't lie, I know you've done that before, you little cretin. Maybe you're looking at this game and thinking to yourself that you'd really enjoy playing this with a friend or a partner, but you don't have a second controller, or maybe you can't visit them for some couch co-op because you don't live together. Well, All You Can Eat actually has you covered with all of this. You can do 2-player couch co-op using one controller by both holding one side of it and both using a single analog stick. So this means you don't need to fork out loads of money for a second controller, which is an amazing thoughtful detail. And if you don't live together but both have a PS5 or Xbox Series X, you now have the ability to play the full game online with friends, which is an absolutely massive advantage of this version of the game, considering you couldn't do this with the original versions. So while this is quite clearly the definitive way of experiencing these two amazing games, what I will say is that there's quite a significant lack of anything new to be found here in terms of actual content. Sure, the new online functionality and the performance and graphical upgrades might be enough to sell the game to you, but for people who don't care much about that and have maybe already played the two games before, you pretty much have already played this. It does have a few brand new levels that are exclusive to this version of the game, and there's a couple of unique characters too, but really, beyond that, there's not a lot else. Don't get me wrong, it's nice having access to alternative skins for all of the characters, but I could have done with a bit more going on here. I would have liked to have seen a store system where you can actually spend the coins that you earn in the levels and the stars that you collect for getting high scores. But unfortunately, just like in the original games, the stars and coins have very little usage, which makes them feel slightly unrewarding. It's extra annoying too because there are actually a hell of a lot of characters on offer here, and it would have been so great unlocking them in the skins one by one. But instead, everything aside from a couple of secret characters are just straight up there from the start. I really do feel like they missed a trick with this. You could have also done stuff like customised your food truck which you drive around when you navigate in the world maps, and maybe even had more in-depth character customization with more cosmetic stuff, but there's nothing like that. Speaking of the world maps, another slight thing I was disappointed by was that All You Can Eat has the content from each of the two games and all of the DLC packs separated into different menus. I kind of expected the content to all be mixed into one large expansive campaign which included every level and was all on one huge world map. But unfortunately, this isn't the case, and it's a little bit strange how they've put so much effort into making the content from both games so uniform, and yet they still chose to distinguish between this content. If the throw-in ability was the reason for this, maybe you could have unlocked the throw-in ability after reaching a certain point in the campaign, and then the 4th star rating for the original Overcooked levels could have taken this new ability into account. Something else which was pretty darn annoying, especially for my girlfriend, is that the game seems to struggle to track the progress of the second player and results in certain trophies not unlocking for player 2. Even if they've played the whole game with player 1 and are signed into their own PSN profile. This obviously isn't an issue at all if you don't care about trophies, but if you do, it's definitely something to be aware of. It's almost like the game tracks everything for both players up until you turn the game off. Then when you pick it up and continue, it forgets everything that player 2 has done up until that point. So yeah, that's a little bit irritating for cooperative trophy hunters. Take all of these negative points with a huge amount of salt though, because at the end of the day, this is the best version of Overcooked available, and it's easily one of the greatest co-op games ever made. You know something is good when its concepts are copied by other games that effectively become Overcooked clones. Some examples of this being Tools Up and Moving Out, which are great in their own right, but Overcooked is the absolute king of this style of game, and I doubt anything will ever take its #1 spot. I've not even mentioned the Versus mode, which is a huge component of the game and gives you even more content to dig your teeth into if you're feeling more competitive. So yeah, despite the game having a reasonably high price tag, you're definitely getting the value in terms of content on offer. What I will say though is that if you've already played Overcooked 1 and 2 and maybe you already have them on PS4 or Xbox One, there's not really much of a reason to upgrade to All You Can Eat. Especially when you consider that you can still play the older last-gen versions of the game on the new consoles via backwards compatibility. However, if you're a massive fan of the series like me, or if you've never played either Overcooked 1 or 2, you really can't go wrong with this. Plus, it has added value if you haven't played any of the DLC packs, because there's a lot of DLC, which practically doubles the length of the game. Plus, the game in general is very replayable and would be a vastly different experience depending on who you're playing it with and how many players you're playing it with. And going for all of the 4-star rankings would take an extremely long time and a lot of practice. So yeah, you're getting a lot of bang for your buck. So to summarise, if you've played both original games recently, there's very little new content to experience here, and even though the performance and graphics are massively improved, I don't feel like that quite justifies the price if you have played both of the original games already. However, if you've only played one of the games, or if you've never played either of them, I would highly recommend All You Can Eat. It's the best version of an absolute incredible set of games.